Many years ago, I was at a conference in another city. There were about 20 of us, half men, half women, almost all married. One evening, we went to a local bar to relax. Local guys were actively flirting with the women at our table. We men winced at their crude attempts while the women laughed and refused. One particularly unsuccessful attempt prompted the comment, "He's lucky I like this beer, otherwise it would be on him." What if it was a famous football player, say Jocko, who said that? Would he have been successful? Asked one of the women with a flirtatious smile in her voice. Yes, absolutely. This was clear. And if that meant, well, especially if it meant that. The women's laughter was sincere, while the men's was slightly forced. Understand that these women were not gray mice who could not find dates. They ranged from pretty to truly beautiful. They were in their late 20s to early 30s and dressed for a night out. What would you tell your husband? One of the men asked doubtfully. Why tell your husband? The answer was immediate and caused laughter and nods of approval from the women. What if your husband were here? The man insisted. We all heard the worry in his voice. One of the women leaned forward with her elbows on the table and looked him straight in the eyes. I remembered her from lunch. She showed photographs of her husband and their adorable 5-year-old daughter. I would tell him that he knows how much I love him and knows that I will always come back to him, but I'm not going to miss this opportunity, and I'll see you tomorrow. She spoke calmly and kindly, but decisively. None of us doubted that she was absolutely serious. Several men's jaws visibly dropped. I knew mine did too. "No, you wouldn't do that," muttered the man next to me. The woman looked at him with regret. "Yes, I would, and I think any woman at this table would do the same. Maybe you would have left with him that night, but if I were your husband, you definitely wouldn't see me tomorrow." He was as serious as she was. Another woman tried to soften the situation. "Listen, I love my husband. I wouldn't trade him for anything. Jocko doesn't mean anything to me and never will, and he probably won't even remember my name the next morning. But spending a night with him, just one night in our entire marriage, would be something I could remember for the rest of my life. An event, with a capital C. It would have nothing to do with how I feel about my husband. After that, I would return home to the man I love, and everything would be as before." There was a tense silence at the table. "Well, now we married men know where we stand," muttered one of the men. "Guys, don't do this," one of the women answered. "It's not that important." The company quickly disbanded, people leaving one or two at a time, quietly returning to the hotel. I have no idea if the women at this table were typical. I was going to ask my wife about it when I got home, but I never mustered up the courage, and I still haven't asked. I'm not sure I want to know the answer. Friday evening. Terry returned home from the conference. Taking her luggage out of the car, she walked into the house, happy to finally be home. She couldn't wait to meet her husband of 12 years, Alan. They had been discussing having children, and now was the perfect time to do it. Terry decided to accept the company's offer for a position that would not require travel. She even considered becoming a stay-at-home mom, since Alan had just been promoted to junior vice president of his department. When she entered the house, she almost fell, tripping over a travel bag standing by the door. At first, she didn't think much of why she was there. "Alan," Terry shouted. "What the hell? I almost broke my neck because of your suitcase in the door." "Hi, Terry," Alan smiled, approaching his beautiful wife. He hugged her and kissed her passionately. "Wow, honey. You seem ready to start having children," Terry said with a devilish smile. Alan took her hand, led her into the living room, and asked her to sit on the sofa. He then walked over to the bar, mixed 2 Jack and Coke drinks, and returned, handing one of them to Terry. "Drink this. We need to talk." Terry shuddered at these words. She used them herself when she broke up with her ex-boyfriends. Alan smiled. "I have great news for you that you won't believe." Terry beamed with pride. "You got a promotion." Alan looked at her in bewilderment. "Even better." "What could be better than your promotion?" she asked in surprise. "You have worked and sacrificed so much for this position as vice president. I brag all the time that I have the perfect husband. You are the smartest person I know. No, dear, Alan replied, even better. Do you remember how we once made a list of celebrities with whom each of us could get a pass to cheat if the opportunity presented itself? We agreed that this would not ruin our marriage. I'm going to use this pass tonight. Terry froze in shock. What the hell is a subscription for treason? Remember, Alan continued, there were 10 women on my list that I could sleep with if given the chance. And you know who comes first, actress Valerie Perry. God, she's hot. So I happened to meet her the other day at Morrison's when I was with the guys. We noticed how she was sitting at one of the tables with her retinue and having fun. She looked up and met my gaze. It was as if she was undressing me with her eyes. My friends made fun of me because she flirts. They encouraged me to go ask her to dance. I told them I wouldn't do it because I'm married and also because she has 2 huge bodyguards. And 10 minutes later, I felt someone touch me on the shoulder. It was Valerie. Yes, I call her Val. She only allows her close friends to be treated this way. Now she considers me her good friend. We danced, and she invited me to her house tonight. I quote, for the most mind-blowing sex of your life, and then you can return to your wife to start your family. Terry sat in shock at Alan's revelations. She began to stutter. Terry, Alan interrupted her. Don't say anything until I'm done. I promise that before we have sex again, I will get tested for diseases. This will take a couple of weeks, or I can use a condom with you. She assured me that she was taking pills. This gives us a 97% chance that she will not carry my first child, but that's a risk I'm willing to take. You won't believe it, Alan continued, but I read a scientific article. Scientists are beginning to believe that once a man has unprotected sex with a woman, his DNA may remain with her forever. They found DNA from different men in women's bodies, even after their deaths. Imagine, every time we see Valerie on screen, we will know that my DNA is somewhere in her body. Just imagine, you may still carry the DNA of other men with whom you had sex. Isn't this interesting information? Nonsense, Terry screamed. She can lie about illnesses. Valerie travels all over the world and has probably slept with men from every country. The damn strains of infections she might have will scare the antibiotics back into the syringe. Okay, Alan replied. I will use a condom with you because I don't want to deny you anything. This won't affect us in any way. Sex with Valerie will be the highlight of my life. He looked at Terry to see how closely she was listening to him. Terry was getting angrier. Her face turned crimson with anger. What do you mean it won't affect us? This will destroy our marriage. I won't allow this. If any woman of easy virtue touches you, I will claw her eyes out and kill you. Terry, Alan said, no, you won't do that. Unlike men with children, I have an advantage. You're 32 years old, and your body isn't what it was in your late teens and early 20s. You always said that I was in the top 10, and all your friends think so. At work, I was even called the most handsome husband among all. I always thought of myself as just average, nothing special, but now I realize you were right. I meet all the requirements that women like you want. I'm 6'3", I have six-pack abs, and I make a six-figure salary. All boxes are checked. You, my dear, are approaching the wall. What the hell is a wall? Terry screamed. Alan smiled and explained. You are already 32, not 22, and your biological clock is starting to tick louder, like Big Ben. If you divorce me, it will take a couple of years, if you can even find a husband who meets all the requirements that I fulfill. So now you're 35, and your ability to bear a child will decline. You may remain childless, and I can marry someone younger, for example, a 25-year-old. She will not only be more able to bear pregnancy, but also more elastic without wrinkles. Statistics show that more than 70% of women who enter into a second marriage get divorced. I will have a choice of women from 20 to 30 years old. And you, my dear, will most likely end up with a man over 40 who can maintain your usual standard of living. In addition, many men at this age already have children from previous marriages and cannot afford a new wife, let alone children. There's one more thing that's not in your favor. Only 20% of men are taller than 6 feet, and being 5'10" won't help your love life. Only 9% of us men earn more than $100,000 per year. You would like to marry a man with a higher education, but most of these men are over 50. Now, only 35% of men in the country have higher education, and this is what most women are looking for. For every man like him, there are 10 like you. You will have a lot of competition for the man you think is worthy. All your friends say that there are no good men our age. Now, if you divorce me, I'm sure they'll call me. Darling, to make it easier for you, I'll call our lawyer and ask you to draw up a marriage agreement. If I sleep with another woman after this, I will leave with nothing. This has nothing to do with how I feel about you. After this, I will return home to the woman I love, and everything will be as before. Terry was seething with anger. Alan, you must have fallen out of a stupid tree and caught yourself on every branch if you think this won't affect our marriage. I won't allow this. Alan asked, do you think this could harm our marriage? I'll give you my full attention when I get back on Saturday. Perhaps Valerie will even teach me new tricks to give you more pleasure. It will just be sex, nothing more. I won't tolerate this, Terry screamed. It's not easy. This means more to me than you can imagine. I'm working so hard to give us the opportunity to have children. I want your children. But I swear, if you do this, I will divorce you and take every cent. Terry, Alan answered calmly, it's just money. I can earn more. But I'll never get that chance again. Please, I want this. I love you with all my heart. Can't you understand? Terry was sobbing. You made a promise to me many years ago to be faithful, or have you forgotten your wedding vows? There was not a word in them about permission to cheat if someone is famous. I will divorce you, regardless of all the consequences. Alan sighed. Okay, I hate you right now. I'll go call her and cancel the meeting. He went into another room to make a call. Terry could hear muffled muttering in the background. Alan then returned to the room. That's it, I canceled everything, he said with a slight smile. However, Terry noticed that he could not look her in the eyes. You bastard, Terry screamed. You're still going to go behind my back, aren't you? It doesn't matter whether I know about it or not. It will still be wrong. Something will change. Maybe you will start kissing me differently or accidentally say someone else's name. When I look at you, you will seem distant to me because you will be thinking about your time with her. You might even look at me differently, and I'll feel like you're trying to hide something. I just realized I want a divorce anyway. Every time you make love to me, I will think that you are thinking about her. And despite your assurances, every time you leave the house, I will suspect that you are with her. I can't live like this. It will make me feel insecure and inadequate as a lover. Do you see? This has already destroyed our marriage, Terry cried. I can never trust you again. I have always admired you and worshipped you in a way that no other woman could. You made me feel like a queen, and I could achieve anything. You were my rock, my foundation, my reason to wake up every morning. God, how I loved you. And now your disrespect for me, your wife, is simply unthinkable. Damn it, Alan, Terry sobbed. You just destroyed our marriage, our dreams, our future children in less than 30 minutes. How could you? She screamed, tears rolling down her cheeks. I want a divorce. Normally, Alan would have rushed to comfort her, allaying her fears and insecurities, but not this evening. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Alan stood up to open the door. Terry looked puzzled and asked, Where are you going? Are you going to this woman of easy virtue? No, honey, just to the door, he replied. Opening the door, Alan turned and said, Darling, it's for you. Terry stood up, wiping her eyes and blowing her nose into a Kleenex. She went to the door. Yes, how can I help? The man said he had a package for her and needed her identification. Here you go, Terry handed him her document. You have received a court notice, he announced. Terry returned to the living room in shock and sat down opposite her husband. There was sadness on his face. Terry, do you know Bob Paxton, who works in your company? I know, Terry answered irritably, This guy is a womanizer. No, dear, Alan objected. That's not true. He only courts single women. I don't like the way he treats them, but he never approaches married people. I've known him for years, and we're pretty good friends. Do you know his motto, dear? Alan asked. Of course I know, Terry snorted. Brothers are more important than girls. He sent me a video of your meeting. I want you to hear it. He accidentally overheard a conversation between about 20 of your colleagues, heatedly discussing something. I think you recognize the woman's voice. There was a click, and the recording began. Listen, I love my husband. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Jocko means nothing to me and never will. He probably wouldn't even remember my name the next morning. But spending one night with him, just one night in the entire time of our marriage, would be an event that I could remember for the rest of my life. Event, you know, with a capital letter. It would have nothing to do with my feelings for my husband. After that, I would return home to the person I love, and everything would be as before. Terry gasped and became hysterical, trying to explain everything. But every time she found a justification for her words, she realized that it was precisely such arguments that she had rejected in her arguments with Alan. Alan put his finger to his lips. "SHH," he said softly. "Terry, you will never know the pain I felt when I received that video. The words I heard from you broke me. I fell in love with you at first sight and tried to prove that I was worthy of being your husband. Everything I've done in our marriage up to this point has been to make you proud of me, so that we can build a life, have children, and grow old together. I wanted to be the one you turn to for comfort, love, and protection. I don't understand what I did wrong." Terry tried to approach Alan, but he put his hands out, stopping her. "Terry, you didn't even say that this would be an isolated incident. I could probably understand if we were talking about a world-class actor or football player like Tom Brady, but from what you said, you would be ready for more. Where would it end? On top-tier celebrities? Or would it come down to the extras, the lighting crew, or even the waiter? Would you pay attention only to the main participants, or would you go further? Where is your border?" Terry started crying. "No, no, it would only be once," she begged. "I meant that I would never do that." I was confused. Alan smiled sadly. "I think your first answer was honest." "No, no, I will never do that. Please, Alan, please forgive me for even thinking such a stupid thing," Terry begged. "In your own words, I am a real alpha male. I meet all the requirements that women have, but now I see that it will never be enough for selfish, spoiled millennial women like you. If I can't keep a woman happy, what chance does the average man have in today's society? During our previous conversation, you convinced me that there was no point in me or any other man trying to build a relationship with a woman. It's a waste of time. I talked to all the men married to women in your group. Those who do not have children are going to file for divorce, and those who have children are stuck in their marriages. They are crushed by the words of their wives, especially a man who has a 5-year-old child. Psychologically, he will never recover. Terry, statistics say that women are much more likely to cheat when they have a hormonal peak. Moreover, they refuse condoms to satisfy their biological impulses. What if you meet Jocko at this point and get pregnant? Imagine a third child who is not mine. I will be forced to stay with you and raise another man's child. If I decide to leave, I will still be haunted by alimony, division of property, and limited communication with my own children, and someone else's child will take up time from my children." Terry shook her head desperately. "I promise this will never happen." Alan was already crying, and tears were rolling down his face. "Yes, as you said in our vows, I will renounce all others until my death, even from celebrities." Terry, how would you feel if you knew that nothing you did would ever be enough? In your own words, I can never trust you. Every time you leave town, I imagine that you will meet someone and live with them. You make me feel completely inadequate as a man. So if you can't give me one reason why I should stay that you haven't rejected before, I'm leaving." Terry, in a panic, tried to come up with something. "No answer, right? Terry, I will love you for the rest of my life, but I can't be your husband anymore. In fact, I will never marry again. I thought, why would a man even get married in our time? It's not worth it. Alan stood up, sobbing in extreme pain. He bent over, hands on his knees, trying to regain his composure. He shouted, Terry, it hurts so much. How can my heart keep beating if it's in such pain? Terry cried so hard that she began to stutter, begging him to forgive her. She could not move from the pain she herself had caused. Alan, staggering, tried to pull himself together. He leaned on the wall to steady himself. He reached for the suitcase. His hands were shaking so much that it was only on the third try that he was able to grab the handle. Terry was sprawled on the floor, crying. When Alan approached the door and opened it, he turned around and said, choking with sobs, Terry, you're forgiven. Then he closed the door behind him. 1 year later, Terry entered the Morrison Cafe and saw Dee sitting alone at a table. Hello, Dee, how are you? Terry asked with an impassive smile. Normal, probably. It was difficult after the divorce, but I'm holding on, Dee sighed. It was the stupidest thing I've ever done. God, Terry, how much weight have you lost? You look anorexic. Dee, Terry began to sob, I just can't forget Alan. I can neither sleep nor eat. My legs feel like they're filled with lead. I just want to die. Darling, Dee smiled, I understand how you feel. But I have a surprise for you today that should cheer you up a little. I think it will make you smile. A few minutes later, a group of musicians entered the cafe and the music started playing. Dee leaned over to Terry and pointed to a table across the room. There was a reserved sign on it. Look, someone important is coming here today. I hope it will be a famous actor. A few minutes later, a beautiful woman and her entourage entered the cafe and headed towards the U-shaped sofa in the corner. She sat down alone, and 2 bodyguards stood at the entrances to the table area. The woman ordered 2 drinks, one for herself, one for the empty seat next to her. She kept looking at her watch, as if she was waiting for someone. Then she picked up the phone and started talking, laughing cheerfully. Look, Dee opened her eyes wide. This is Valerie Perry. God, she's so beautiful. Terry smiled slightly and said, She's on Alan's list. On what other list? Dee asked interestedly, raising her eyebrows. Terry explained. These were our lists. Alan and I had lists of celebrities of the opposite sex. Each had 10 names. These lists were like passes that allowed you to spend the night with someone on the list without threatening the marriage. It was just a joke. I wish I had a list like that before I spent the night with Mark Lavalier, Dee chuckled. Hearing this, Terry opened her mouth in surprise. Dee, what nonsense. This list was just for fun. Treason is treason. If it weren't for my arrogance and big stupid mouth, I would still be married to Alan. Even if you can get away with it, it's still wrong. It's a pity that I didn't realize this earlier. A minute later, Dee stood up and said, I'll be right back. I want to introduce you to one of my friends. Terry remained sitting with her glass. A minute later, Dee returned, leading a tall, very attractive man. Terry, I would like to introduce you to Mark Lavalier. He is the Sharks' primary tight end. Mark, this is Terry. Mark kissed her hand and asked, Shall we dance, beautiful lady? No, thank you, Terry replied. Sorry, I'm just not in the mood. Terry, Dee was surprised. This is Mark Lavalier. All the women here today want to be with him. Terry apologized again. Sorry, Mr. Lavalier, I'm just not ready. Mark smiled. He must be a special person, he said with a sigh. He is like that, Terry confirmed, sobbing. Dee immediately suggested, What about me, Mark? I would love to dance with you. Mark laughed. No, Di, I already danced with you. I guess I'll try my luck with Valerie Perry. It was nice meeting you, Terry. If you change your mind, let me know. Dee was left in shock. Mark approached Valerie, but her bodyguards made it clear that she was not interested. Mark walked past Dee and Terry. Dee tried again. Well, let's dance now. Mark just shrugged. No, thanks, Dee. I guess I'll try my luck with a couple of married ladies who just came in. If it doesn't work out, I'll come back. Dee was amazed. She finally realized what she had lost for what she then considered a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Both women sat in silence, feeling lonely. Dee was the first to notice the man heading towards Valerie's table, but she only saw his back. "Terry, is this her companion?" Dee whispered. "I wonder who he is. Actor? She's married, right?" The man sat down at the table, but the bodyguard blocked Terry's view. "I think they're not together," Terry explained her thoughts. "She sits in the center of the sofa, at least a meter away from him. If they were lovers, she would be sitting next to him." The men kept coming up to them, inviting them to dance. Dee accepted the invitations, but Terry refused. After one of the dances, Dee returned, breathing heavily. "Terry, you need to forget Alan. And the only way to do this is to meet other men." Suddenly, Terry screamed, "Dee, look, it's Alan. God, he looks great. God, how I miss him," and began to cry. Alan turned, saw Terry, and turned pale. He said something to Valerie and hurriedly headed towards the toilet. Terry noticed the pain on his face, the same pain she saw at the time of their divorce. She cried even harder, reliving all her wounds. She lowered her head when she heard a woman's voice. "Sorry." Terry looked up to see Valerie Perry standing at their table. "Can I join you, Terry?" she asked. Terry was in shock as Valerie sat down in their booth. Valerie sat down opposite Terry and, smiling, asked, "So are you the great Terry James who broke Alan's heart?" Terry burst into tears even more. "Yes, it's me," she sobbed. Valerie put her hands on Terry's and said, "I want to congratulate you. Never in my life have I seen a man destroyed as much as you did. And at the same time, he didn't even have to catch his wife cheating." Terry, trying to calm down, said with difficulty, "I know. How did you know that I was his ex-wife?" Valerie smiled. "On his table. Your photo is still on it. He took over my account when he was promoted to vice president. We became quite close, like brother and sister. I'm happily married, but I'll tell you, if I weren't married, he would definitely be at the top of my list." Terry stopped crying and repeated with hope in her voice, "Is my photograph still on his desk?" Valerie nodded. "Yes, he told me the whole story. You know, this didn't surprise me at all. I hear things like this all the time from my actor friends. They brag all the time about their victories over you married women. People like you are just stupid. You only see these men at their best. You see them in expensive suits after months of training and preparation for their roles. You're impressed by their performances at premieres and award ceremonies. You fall in love with their on-screen characters, not real people. Why do you think that relationships between actors and actresses fall apart so quickly? They love the characters, not the people who play them. You want to be with them instead of your boring husband. But I want to tell you that there are much worse things than a boring husband. Actors are spoiled, self-centered children. Not all, but most. I worked with them for months, and I assure you, the shine of their gilded armor fades very quickly. They fart, they burp, just like any other man. In bed, they are no better than ordinary men, and sometimes even worse. They think they are doing you a favor just by letting you be around them. Women think they're so wonderful just because everything is new and exciting. In 6 months, they will be just like any other man to you. That's when you'll know if they're good in bed. A man who really loves you will try to find out what you like and will give his all to make you happy." Terry sobbed. "Valerie, I would give anything to get everything back. I was so selfish in my thoughts and words. I didn't realize how much pain it would cause. I was so short-sighted. Tell me, is Alan okay? Is he eating?" Valerie frowned. "I'm worried about Alan. He starts to get sick. He doesn't smile anymore. He still hasn't gotten over your leaving. It's horrible. He is one of the most handsome men I have ever seen. He could outshine all leading men in Hollywood. I know from my sources that he just works, tries to train, and returns home. He is morally destroyed. If he hadn't made so much money for me on my projects, I would have long ago started looking for a new financial advisor." Valerie looked straight into Terry's eyes. "I think you would never cheat on Alana again. Even if it was an actor or Jocko." "Right. Terry cringed when she heard Jocko's name. Did he really tell you about that conversation? She asked with a sigh. Valerie nodded. I told you, we've become quite close. He manages a lot of my finances, and I always want to know who I'm dealing with. No way, that's definitely not going to happen now, Terry replied. I know I ruined everything with Alan. All I want is to put him out of pain. Now I can't imagine myself getting married again. I haven't met a single man who could compare with Alan. Well, dear, Valerie chuckled, you have become the alpha's widow. Terry looked at her confusedly, not understanding what she was talking about. Valerie explained. Once she meets a man who a woman considers alpha, no one else will suit her. Anyone you date from now on will never compare to Alan. You will always compare them to Alan, and they will always lose. To prove my point, remember why you turned down Mark? Yes, I know who he is. Yes, he is an attractive man. But the thing is, now that you don't have Alan, Mark can't compare to him. If you were married to Alan, I'm sure you would have gone after Mark before it all fell apart. Terry burst into tears. I know. Why did I do this? Alan is perfect. Valerie laughed. We all want what we can't have. There is an old saying, having and wanting are two different things. Besides, women tend to think about the present moment, and that's all that matters. Men are strategists. They think about the long term. I think this is why women can block and compartmentalize their romances, but men cannot. Perhaps this is why women are able to hide it so well. 90% of them never get caught. Men are caught more often. You know that I am married. My husband is an attractive man. He's no one special. Well, no one is special except for me. But believe me, in our house, he is the head of the family. When I come home, he is the boss. Although I let him think so. Both women laughed. Valerie continued, I get tempted all the time. I'll tell you what I do to stop myself from cheating. I close my eyes and imagine the pain this will cause to my beloved man. I imagine driving away from the house, and in the rearview mirror, I see 3 crying children next to their father. These few seconds change everything. If I had cheated on my husband, I wouldn't have had a second chance. And you think my money is important to him? He signed the marriage contract. If we divorce, he won't get anything of what I earned. He is a writer and makes good money from it. I'm sure he would have been quite successful without me. Let me tell you a little story that might help you. My husband and I dated for 3 months straight. We saw each other every day. I spent more time at his house than at mine. I was in love with him. I even gave up going to the cinema to stay with him. And then one day, I met a guy you would call Jack. He invited me to dinner. I always wanted to go on a date with him and knew that this would be my last chance. At that time, my future husband and I had not agreed that we would only date each other, so I thought I could afford one more fling before asking him for exclusivity. Everything was fine in my head. I am Valerie Perry, and my relationship with my future husband will be fine. I will make amends. I will marry him and bear him children. How wrong I was. That Saturday evening, I simply forgot about my man. Jack and I were at a local restaurant when I saw my future husband with the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. She was flawless. He was completely captivated by her and didn't even notice me. At that moment, I realized that I had lost him, and it killed me. When she got up to go to the toilet, I decided to take a closer look at her. She was so beautiful that I almost fell in love with her myself, Valerie grinned. I followed her into the toilet. While I was fixing my makeup, she left the booth. She washed her hands, turned around, and simply smiled. God, even her teeth were perfect. I was miserable all evening. I swear she turned around and grinned at me one day. I saw her hand slide under the table. I knew she was running it along his thigh. Along the very thigh that my hand should have been sliding along, not hers. I felt sorry for my Jacko. I left him that night as soon as he drove me home. It wasn't until the following Thursday that I found the courage to go to my future husband's house to beg him to take me back. He said we weren't an exclusive couple and I could do whatever I wanted. I told him it was nonsense, and he knows it. I swore that there had been no sex between Jacko and me and offered to take an infection test to prove that I was healthy. I wanted him to tell me if he had sex with that woman that evening, but he never admitted. You can't imagine how much humiliation I had to endure. Yes, the famous Valerie Perry was on her knees, begging for a second chance. I allowed him to do to me that night what I had never allowed any man to do before, just to get him back. Keep this trump card in your back pocket. By Saturday evening, my agent accidentally leaked information that I was in a serious relationship and in love. Terry looked at Valerie and asked, "What did you do that night?" hoping to get some ideas. Valerie leaned over and whispered in her ear. "Is it true?" Terry squeaked. "Did you do this for him?" "Yes, that night and every time he wants it," Valerie answered confidently. "Terry, we still fight and argue, but there will never be anything that would make me give him up. We don't have sex every night. Sometimes I'm just not in the mood, sometimes he is. Sometimes I can't even look at him, and other times I thank God that I married him. Do you know what attracts me most sexually to my husband? These are two small things. This is when he changes our daughter's diapers or plays on the floor with the children. At such moments I want to pounce on him right there. It's sexy. He adores our children, and I adore him for it. Marriage and relationships are strange things, but I wouldn't trade them for anything in the world." "You stay here," Valerie ordered. "I'll be back soon. I'll go check on Alan." The guards followed Valerie to the men's room. She sent one of them inside to make sure Alan was okay. He returned and said that there was no one in the toilet except Alan. "Knock, knock," Valerie asked softly, peeking through the door. "Alan, are you okay, honey?" "Yes," he replied. "I'll be out in a minute." The stall door opened and Alan stepped out, heading to the sink to wash his face. Valerie took his hand. "Come with me, honey," she said, leading him out of the closet. He started to go to his table, but Valerie pulled him towards Terry's table. Alan froze in front of the round sofa, staring at Terry. Both remained silent. "Sit down, Alan," Valerie ordered. "Sit down now or lose my contract." Alan slowly sat down at the table. "Move over, Alan," Valerie said, sitting down next to him. This made him appear closer to Terry. Valerie looked at them with obvious disappointment, slowly shaking her head. "Now I will talk and you two will listen. You both are a complete mess. Let's start with you, Miss Terry. Why did you decide that you have the right to justify your thoughts about sleeping with another man?" Terry cringed at the words that Valerie was spewing out. "What you have done is to choose the image of a man that Alan will never be able to compete with. It's like competing with the memory of a deceased lover. This is impossible. It would be kinder if you chose the garbage man. At least it would give Alan some kind of achievable goal." When he heard what you said, it was like putting a gun to his head and saying, "Now you're playing Russian roulette, whether you like it or not. And the question is not whether the gun will fire, but when it will happen." It would be even easier if he just caught you in bed with another man than to realize that every time you walk out the door, he has to worry about whether this will be the one. Terry winced every time Valerie said the words "sleep" and "with another man" in the same sentence. Was it worth the fantasy? You didn't cheat on him with a capital I, but the consequences were the same. You don't live together anymore, Valerie finished, trying to get her point across. Speaking desperately, Terry said, "Valerie, I've replayed that conversation with Alan 1,000 times in my head since that day. It took me a long time to realize that Alan had given me the rope to hang myself. He repeated to me my own words spoken at that conference at different moments of our dispute. Every time he made a case for doing the same to me, I told him why it would be wrong and that it went against our marriage vows. And when he asked why he should stay, I couldn't give him an answer." Valerie laughed. "Yeah, that sounds like Alan. He was supposed to become a lawyer. Most of the problems men have are not the fact of betrayal. Oh, don't get me wrong, cheating is important. But the main problem is the disrespect he experienced in front of other men. Men usually don't care what women think, but what other men think matters to them." Those men with whom you spoke then probably felt sorry for your husbands. They most likely thought that your husbands were naive simpletons and thanked God that they did not have such entitled wives as the three of you on that recording. The only thing men really want is respect from other men. What would you do if someone else showed your husband the same disrespect as you? Terry blurted out without thinking, I would rip them apart. Realizing what she had just said, she lowered her head in shame. Valerie reached across the table and squeezed Terry's hand. I believe you, but it's not me you have to convince. Then she laughed and added, and one more thing. Do you think that I sleep with men in every country and I have such diseases that even antibiotics are afraid of them? Terry gasped, closed her eyes, and winced at these words. Sorry, I didn't mean that. I was angry and tried to reason with him. Laughing, Valerie waved it off. Don't worry. Valerie turned to Alan. Now it's your turn. You are the victim here. You have endured as much pain in this relationship as a man can withstand, short of actual betrayal. But she didn't cheat on you with a capital I. You were hurt, and you continue to suffer. No one has the right to tell you how you should feel. But as your friend, I will say, you need help. If you fail to cope with this, you will drive yourself into such despair from which there will be no way out. You're out of your mind right now. You don't smile anymore. And to be honest, you weren't much fun anymore. She turned to Terry. Now look at him. Valerie nudged Alan to look at Terry. Come on, Alan, look her in the eyes. Terry sat looking at him pleadingly and with a slight smile. Valerie continued to encourage Alan to take a look. Any fool can see that she loves you, and you certainly don't have to be a fool to realize that you still love her. Alan tried to say something, but nothing came out. Valerie turned to Terry. Now it's your turn. This is your chance, and don't you dare justify what you said at that conference. Alan, please believe me, Terry begged. I was such a fool. Not only did I think I had the right to cheat, and yes, it would be cheating no matter who it was with. I humiliated you in front of my colleagues in the worst way a wife can humiliate the man she loves. I have since apologized to each of those men for my thoughts and actions. In a way, I'm glad you found out. It made me look at myself really critically. I talked a lot about love and loyalty, but I was such a hypocrite. If I had heard the same thing from you, I would have been just as hurt. And when you did this to me, I felt such pain that no dictionary can describe. I am ready to do anything to regain your trust. You can video call me anytime to check what I'm doing. Smiling through her tears, she added, I'll even wear a chastity belt. A smile appeared on Alan's lips at these words. I will wear a GoPro camera around my neck. You can put a tracker on my car. I will leave all my devices open for you so you can check them at any time. She took a deep breath and continued, but you know they were always open. If you remember, we had such an agreement from the very beginning. We both agreed that in marriage, spouses have no right to privacy from each other. If you want privacy, stay alone. I'm even willing to take a lie detector test every month to confirm my fidelity. I myself destroyed this trust, and I will have to make every effort to restore it. I will sign the marriage contract. If I ever do anything that violates the marital code, I will leave with what I came into this marriage with. If we have children, custody will remain with you. I'm even ready to just live with you without the guarantee of marriage until you feel that I've earned your trust. Terry sat there, wiping away the tears running down her cheeks. Alan wondered how to answer. Valerie said with a grin, Terry, you mean the post-nuptial agreement, don't you? Terry looked at her and then at Alan. Alan, have you applied? I signed them. Alan simply looked at Valerie as if asking, how do you know that? Valerie began to reproach Alan. Don't you dare look at me like that. You left it in a visible place. She turned to Terry. He left them under your photo on the console. I was left alone in his office and wanted to get a better look at the woman he loved so much, but who broke his heart. Terry tensed at these words. Valerie continued to explain how she found out. I went over and took your photo to look closer, and saw the divorce papers underneath it. I noticed that you signed them, but he didn't, so you're still Mrs. Alan James. Alan looked down and sighed heavily. Finally, he replied, I just couldn't do it. Terry, unable to contain her emotions, tried to hug Alan, but as she approached, she noticed that he tensed. She froze. Valerie, noticing Alan's reaction, intervened. Alan, dear, do you want to keep my contract? Then take your wife and dance with her. And while the slow music is playing, you will stay on the dance floor. If you don't do this, I imagine how happy your boss will be when he finds out that you've lost me as a client. Alan couldn't believe he was being forced to dance with Terry. Valerie grinned. And don't you dare look at me like that. It's a privilege to be rich, powerful, and also your biggest client. Now go, you're losing the music. She stood up to allow Alan to leave the table first and waited patiently for Terry to react. Terry sat there, confused. Valerie looked at her in surprise and threatened. If you don't want to dance with him, then I will. Terry quickly slipped out from behind the table and headed towards the dance floor with Alan. Alan turned and extended his arms, inviting her to get into a classic dance position, but Terry ignored it. She hugged him, wrapping her arms around his body and pressing herself against him. Alan put his hands on her waist, and they began to sway from side to side as if dissolving in each other's arms. Valerie called over to one of her guards. Go up to the group and say I want 5 slow dance songs in a row. Let them last at least 30 minutes. Pay them generously. As the second song began, Alan felt his shirt getting wet where Terry had laid her head on his chest. He gently took her chin, lifted her face, and saw that tears were streaming down her cheeks. Terry mouthed, I'm sorry. Alan smiled at her and replied softly, I know. Terry buried her face in his shoulder again, holding him tighter as if she never wanted to let go. After the second song ended and the third began, Alan felt someone tap him on the shoulder. It was Mark Lavalier who asked, Can I stand for your dance? Alan retreated, but Terry immediately pulled him back to her, shaking her head. Alan felt another tap on his shoulder. Lavalier asked again, Can I dance with this beautiful lady? Don't monopolize the most beautiful woman on the dance floor. She needs a real man to dance with. He pushed Alan aside and squeezed between them. Terry mouthed to Alan, Help me. Mark, meanwhile, took her to the dance floor. Do you like it? Mark asked with a grin. Don't know. Terry answered mockingly. Now let me go. Mark got angry and pressed her harder against his thigh. One of Valerie's bodyguards leaned over to inform her of the impending conflict between Alan and Mark. Do you want me to intervene? Valerie replied. Not yet. Let's see where this leads. She took out her phone to take video. Alan intervened and pushed Terry away from Mark. He managed to throw him back, shouting, Get your hands off my wife. Mark stepped back, caught the legs of another dancer, and fell to the floor with a crash. Everyone around started laughing and taking pictures of him. At this moment, Terry screamed and instinctively attacked Mark. Get away from my husband. There was a fight. Alan ran up to Terry and, raising her head, asked, Terry, are you okay? Valerie came over to help. Her bodyguards picked up Alan and Terry and escorted them to the table. Valerie called the waitress and asked, Bring us ice in bags. Alan and Terry sat with ice packs over their swollen eyes. Valerie noted, If you both fought for your marriage the same way you just defended each other, you would have succeeded. Remove the ice packs, please. She added, I'll let the cops who arrest this idiot know about your injuries so you don't get charged with domestic violence tomorrow. Now take off the bags and press your heads together so I can take a photo of your paired bruises. Valerie took a photo. I'll send you a copy, Alan. Terry turned to Alan to try to convince him one last time. Alan, give me one more chance, just one. She leaned over and whispered something in his ear. Alan's eyebrows rose in surprise and his one intact eye widened. He asked, Seriously, are you ready to give it away just like that after all the years of my begging and pleading? Yes, dear, Terry smiled. I'll even get a tattoo on my butt that says Alan's ass. Alan smiled. What about everything else you promised to do? Yes, honey, I'll do it for you, Terry said, leaning down and kissing him lightly on the lips. With a sly look, she added, we're still married, so if you want to take me home for just one night, it won't be a sin. Alan replied, yes, but what I have in mind is illegal in 49 of the 50 states, including the District of Columbia and all us territories. He winked at her. Terry grabbed his hand. Let's go break the laws, Clyde. They both looked at Valerie. Valerie laughed. Wow, Alan, you just forgot about me and are leaving me for another beauty. And he didn't even think about me. Alan looked guilty at her comment, but Valerie continued laughing. Go, both of you. Get out of here. I need to get up early tomorrow, and I need to call my husband. She told Mitch to find Dee and bring her to the table. A few minutes later, Dee appeared, accompanied by Mitch. Valerie asked her to sit opposite. Dee, you did a great job bringing Terry here, Valerie said, sliding the envelope towards her. You should have been an actress. Dee's face lit up with praise, but Valerie immediately became stern. Di, you are a woman of easy virtue. You've ruined at least 2 marriages, including your own, and nearly ruined 2 more. You will sever all contact with Terry and Alan. And believe me, if I find out that this is not so, this person, she nodded at Mitch, will visit you and you will never be able to dance again. Dee sat in shock at the threat. Valerie added with a contemptuous smile. Now get out of here, you vile woman. Dee ran out crying, heading to the toilet. Valerie took her phone out of her bag. Mitch, pay the band and the waitress while I call my husband. She dialed the number. Hello, George. Dear, I miss you and the children. I'll be in my room in 30 minutes. Put the kids to bed and we'll video call. After everything that happened tonight, I'm horny as hell. And this time, keep the camera away, otherwise last time you cut off the top 10 centimeters. Bye, love you. Valerie thought about the brunette she had seen with her husband that night. George didn't know she had found it. She turned out to be an elite call girl named Emily. Sun Tzu said, know your enemy. After celebrating Alan's 70th birthday, the last of his children and grandchildren closed the door behind them as they left. Ugh, Alan gasped as the door slammed shut. Terry giggled. Darling, I haven't given you your birthday present yet. Alan shook his head and sighed. Looks like I'll have to take the blue pill. I used to be able to stay all night long, and now it takes me all night to do it. Give me 30 minutes. Terry laughed. While we wait, I want to show you something. Do you remember how I promised to be faithful? Last week, I took a lie detector test, and here are the results. It was a very reputable local company. The man who did the test left me his business card if you want to call him. She showed Alan the document. You can see every question I was asked and the results. The only question I failed at was, do you love your husband? When I answered no, she smiled. Terry sat down next to Alan, showing him the results. As you can see, I went through all the questions related to you. This is the one that is especially important to me for you to see. She pointed to one of the questions. I was asked if I've had sex, including all kinds, with anyone other than you since we got married. And I passed. It was a little awkward when he asked this question. Alan looked into her eyes and asked, is the honey, we need to talk conversation going to start now? He smiled and added, let me guess, you have a lover you want to be with, and there's nothing I can do about it. You caught me, Terry smiled. I really have a lover. In 20 minutes, I'm going to make love to him, and you can't do anything about it. And it's more than just sex. I love him very much, and there's nothing you can do about it. She began to walk up the stairs to the bedroom, taking off her blouse and throwing it on the floor. She pulled down her bra straps, unclasped it, and threw it off as well. She then took off her skirt and pulled down her panties. Alan smiled when he saw the tattoo on her butt, Alan's ass. She turned around and winked. I'm waiting for my lover. When he is ready, let him come to my bed. Alan grinned. I'm ready. The blue pill works faster than usual. An hour later, they were both exhausted. Terry lay in Alan's arms and smiled at him. I love you. He kissed the top of her head. I love you too. Alan, dear, can I finally take off my chastity belt? No. Dee continued her depraved lifestyle and was eventually left alone with the cats. As for Mark, he was arrested for assault. He was tried many times for breaking up many marriages. He was kicked off the team for violating NFL moral standards. Having lost everything, he moved to the West Coast, where he worked for a small local television station. He got married and has 4 children. He became a faithful husband, but categorically refused to take his wife to the dance. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.